Hey guys, it's Kyla at the MJC, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about the personal property division section of the marital settlement agreement without minor children. But before we get going, I do want to make sure that everybody knows that nothing in this video is intended to be legal advice. It is a video. So I'm not able to analyze your specific situation, and I'm not able to tell you whether what you're agreeing to is something a court can approve or whether it's in your best interest. So if you have those sort of questions, and with property settlements and marital property agreements, we always think it's a good idea to get some brief legal advice. You can get brief legal advice for free here in Milwaukee through the Marquette Volunteer Legal Clinics. If you're not located in Milwaukee, then you can contact your clerk of court to find out what resources are available in your neck of the woods. All right, so the first section is household items. And you'll see that these sections correspond with sections in the financial disclosure document. Let me just scroll down a little bit here. So you can see we have household items, and that was the one where you guys would have gone through and valued all your furniture and so forth. And you see we have the same thing in our other persons because John and Jane both have these, and so they both went through and put the information about their stuff. You have a couple of ways to fill out that household item section here. If, like John and Jane, you have already split up all of your household items, then what you can say is joint petitioner A will keep all of the items in their possession. And you can say his or her if you prefer that pronoun. And then here, joint petitioner B will keep all of the items in their possession. And again, you can use your preferred pronouns there if you'd like. So that's sort of the nice, easy legal shorthand way to just say, we already split up our stuff, so we're each keeping the stuff in our houses. So that's a way to do it if you've already split it up. One thing to note about this is it isn't super enforceable, right? So if down the line, John and Jane are fighting over who gets the blue lamp, this doesn't explicitly say who gets the blue lamp. One of them would have to be able to prove that it was in their possession at the time that this was signed and approved. So this is best if you guys have split your stuff up, you have no disagreements, you're not worried about the blue lamp or any other household items. If you haven't agreed to something like this, so if you and your spouse do need to list out who will get everything, then you can either, if you can fit it in this spot, you could take one line and you could say, blue lamp, bedroom set, etc. You can sort of go through all of the items, tools, and then you indicate who is keeping them, so either Jane or John, and you can see these correspond if you're joint petitioners. Joint petitioner A will be here, joint petitioner B will be here. If you filed originally as a petitioner and a respondent and are now going forward stipulated, then A will be the petitioner and B will be the respondent. And I should note, if you are going forward stipulated, then instead of joint petitioner A here, you would just write petitioner, petitioner like it is here. And instead of joint petitioner B, you would write that the respondent would keep all of the items in their possession. So, so if you need to list out the individual items, you can do that. What some people will do is list some items. So, blue lamp, bedroom set, are going specifically to Jane, but then they just put down here all other items. Each party keeps what is in their possession. So you can do it like that as well if you just want to be specific about some items, but obviously don't need to list every single item in your possession. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it like this because that's what we find most people who are going forward jointly is they've already figured out the household item situation. So then for each of these sections from now on, unfortunately, we can't do that fun possession trick on any other section. So we want to make sure that they match the financial disclosures. And you can see we're back to, this is John's financial disclosure. we have both of these vehicles here. And we want to make sure, I know you've heard it before on the financial disclosure video, but make sure that each financial disclosure should list both cars. So you can see here, this car is just owned by John, but it would still be listed on Jane's financial disclosure, and the car they own together is listed there as well. So just like you want to make sure all items are on both financials, regardless of who owns them, you're going to make sure that the financials should match this marital settlement. So you can see we have John's financial disclosure lists 2 vehicles. Jane's financial disclosure lists both vehicles. And then here on the marital settlement agreement, we list both vehicles. So it's a lot of making sure these sections match up. Then you'll go over here and you're going to indicate who is keeping it. So A, again, is joint petitioner A or the original petitioner. And B is joint petitioner B, or if you didn't start together, then the original respondent. So in our case, Jane is keeping the car in her possession, John's keeping the car in his, so we'll mark that way. Next, you have life insurance, and I'm sorry to keep pulling this up, but I have to check every time to see what is on this document, because again, we want them to match. So here it looks like Jane has a Northwestern Mutual policy. We're going to list that here. And again, you have to list it even if you're not agreeing, even if it was something you got after you guys split up, no matter what, you're going to want to list it. Basically, think of those financial disclosures as you guys saying, court, here's all the stuff we have. And then this marital settlement is you guys saying, court, this is how we're going to divide our stuff. So even if you agree, maybe especially if you agree, you still want to make sure you get everything down so it's clear. So here, if you know the policy number, you can list it. Those of you that have been watching these videos probably know that I've said that here in Milwaukee, we find we can often get away, at least with filing, with not having a policy number. If you have it, that's great information to have and put in. More information is always better. But we find at least filings aren't being turned away for not having that policy number. So we'll go ahead and put that here. Business interests, again, you can see every time I'm going back to the financial disclosure and I'm making sure that it matches up. So there was also that flower business that Jane owns. We're going to list that here. And this one's a little bit weird because it's over the page break. So keep an eye out for that. Sometimes if you have an older version of the forms, that page break will happen at the stocks, bonds, mutual funds. But just make sure wherever the page break is for you that you're catching this one because a lot of people forget that section. And you'll want to put the address of the business. So it was 1234 East West Main Street, which again, not a real location. And we'll say Jane is going to keep that business. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, the name of the company and the number of shares. We can see here, looks like John had a few shares in Walmart. So we'll list that here. And I should note, if you guys don't have something, so John and Jane, because they are sample people, have basically everything here so that we can show how everything gets filled in. But if you don't have something, let's say you don't have stocks, bonds, mutual funds, or you didn't have any business interests, then you're just going to write none in all caps and move on to the next section. Now make sure, because these have to match, here where Jane has a business, they don't put none, they put Jane's business, even if John doesn't have a business. But if neither of them had stocks, bonds, or mutual funds, then we could just put none and go on to the next section. But as I said, John and Jane are sample people, so they have a lot of stuff so that I can show you all the sections. So we'll say John is keeping his 50 shares in Walmart. Pension and retirement accounts. And you guys can see every time I'm going back to this financial disclosure, because the financial disclosure and the marital settlement agreement go hand in hand. You want them to match each other. Everything that's listed on the financial should be listed on the marital settlement. Everything that's listed on the marital settlement should be listed on the financial disclosures. Everything listed on one financial should be listed on the other. So it really is, when we say that the financial disclosures are the base of the whole part 2, we're not kidding. And Primerica, this was a Roth IRA. And great. So then we're just putting that here as well. And then we're going to say who's keeping them. And in our situation, you can see I'm going through and just saying each person that has them is keeping them. So, originally you can see the Voya and the Acme pension were both Jane's, and the Primerica was John's. In reality, if you're wanting to agree to divide things differently, you can do that. So let's say John and Jane wanted to split the Walmart shares, we could do that. If you're ever checking both people, you do want to just make sure that you're going to indicate how that division is going to work. So you could say split 50-50, or however else you want to put that. Yeah, so you certainly can do that. I am mostly giving them the stuff they already have, because we find most folks who are filing jointly, that's what's happening, is they've already really effectively split their stuff up, and they're just recording that down for the court. But obviously, if you're wanting to do something different, if you want to have the car that's in husband's possession go to wife, or the car that's in wife A's possession go to wife B, or whatever you want to do, you can definitely do that. Well, I guess I can't say you can definitely do that because I'm not a judge, but you can definitely put it on the form and ask for it. But I'm just sort of going with what we typically see in our clinics. All right, so then same thing, the bank accounts section. We're going to put the bank account. Now, one thing that happens with the bank accounts, and we didn't represent it very well here, is sometimes you and your spouse may have the same bank. So here we made it so it's really clear, one's a U.S. bank, one's a Landmark. But we find some people, maybe you have 4 U.S. banks. And so it's not super clear to just put the name of the bank, because obviously if I, let's say John and Jane had 2 U.S. bank accounts, and we're saying one's going to Jane and one's going to John. Well, which one's going to which? And so if you have different institutions, if you have the same institution, so John and Jane had 2 U.S. bank accounts, then we would typically include the type of account, checking or savings or checking/savings, and the last 4 digits of the account number, just so it's clear which account you're talking about. Make sure it isn't more than the last 4 digits, because obviously this information, some of it is public record, and you don't want folks to know all of your full bank account information. All right, so then we've got Landmark, and that was a savings. You can do this also even if they don't, if they aren't the same institution. So if we just want to make sure that it's clear who gets what, we can do that here as well. But I find it's most important if you have situations where you're using the same bank, because you want to be clear who is keeping which bank account. And that might not be clear if all of our banks are through U.S. Bank or Landmark Credit Union or Chase or Associated or PNC or whatever your bank might be. You want to make sure that it's clear who keeps what. And so again, here we're just marking. You can see every time I've marked who's keeping which one. And sometimes you might say both of us are, and explain how that's going to work. With bank accounts, again, who's keeping the bank account, or if it's not going to be someone's keeping it, if you're going to keep it joint. Sometimes we see folks will leave it joint because they're going to, eventually give it to the kids or whatever. Just make sure you're putting a little explanation, and I usually put that over as close to this column as I can about what that means to you. And then last but not least, other personal property. John and Jane did have some other personal property. They had great anhydrous salt shakers, which are probably actually household items, but for whatever reason, they were so important that Jane wanted to make sure they were listed separately. And then it also looks like they have a dog. Dogs, cats, hamsters, pets are all other personal property. And so it looks like Fido is John's dog. So we'll say that John's going to keep his dog. So that is all of that. If you find you run out of lines, so let's say John and Jane had another 401k or a pension or something that needed to be listed, you can either add it on a line. So if John, and IRA, so he has another IRA, you could add it here. If they're both going to the same person, you can put 2 items on a line as long as they're going to the same person. The other option is, if it's too much and you can't make it fit, or they're not all going to the same person or what have you, you can click See Attached. And then you can just attach a Word document where you can explain, John will keep the IRA, Jane will keep the this. And you can go through and explain all of that information. But we find most people are able to fit all of their stuff here. All right, well, that is all for this video. I will be back shortly, and we'll talk about the next sections in this form. Go out and represent yourselves well.